President Donald Trump on Friday signed an executive order to rebrand the Pentagon, allowing the storied military headquarters and its leadership to once again use the name Department of War. Calling it a more appropriate label for modern times, Trump made the announcement in the Oval Office before putting pen to paper.
So this is something we thought long and hard about. We've been talking about it for months, Pete and I, and Dan. Dan came into the fold. By the way, a great general. He headed up I wouldn't call it an attack. I'd almost call that one maybe even more than an attack. What he did with Iran, you saw the success of that operation. It was perfect. In fact, this was sent to me by the great company that makes that particular B-2 bomber, and it was flawless. It was actually flawless. They flew for 37 hours back and forth, and there wasn't a bolt that was out of condition. There wasn't an engine failure. There was no problem. It was a perfect attack, and it knocked out any possible nuclear capability for Iran, which nobody wanted to see, and we weren't going to put up with. So great job, Dan. And we've been talking about this Department of War. So we won the First World War. We won the Second World War. We won everything before that and in between. And then we decided to go woke, and we changed the name to Department of Defense. So we're going Department of War. And I'd like to ask our Secretary of War to say a few words. Pete Hegseth. I think it's a much more appropriate name, especially in light of where the world is right now. We have the strongest military in the world. We have the greatest equipment in the world. We have the greatest manufacturers of equipment by far. There's nobody to even compete. And you see that with this and so many other things. The Patriots are the best. Every element of the military, we make the best by far. So, Pete, I'd like to ask you and maybe Dan Raisin Kane to say a few words, please.
Implementation began almost immediately. Pentagon staff updated signage outside Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's office. The order authorizes the U.S. Secretary of Defense, the Department of Defense, DoD, and subordinate officials to use secondary titles, such as Secretary of War, Department of War, and Deputy Secretary of War, in official correspondence, public communications, ceremonial contexts, and non-statutory documents across the executive branch. According to a fact sheet obtained by CNN, the department's website, formerly defense.gov, now reroutes to war.gov, where U.S. Department of War is prominently displayed. The familiar acronym DoD has been swapped out for DOW in numerous headlines and internal pages. Standing alongside Trump at the signing, Hegseth described the change as a return to the military's roots.
So this War Department, Mr. President, just like America, is back. Thank you for your leadership and your clarity. We're going to set the tone for this country. America first, peace through strength, brought to you by the War Department.
The executive order also directs all executive departments and agencies to recognize and accommodate the new secondary titles in both internal and external communications. It instructs Hegseth to recommend additional steps, legislative and executive, to permanently rename the U.S. Department of Defense to the U.S. Department of War, the fact sheet noted. Historically, the Pentagon's name has changed only through congressional action. The original Department of War was established by President George Washington to oversee the Army. The title was abandoned during a major post-World War II reorganization. In 1947, President Harry Truman signed the National Security Act, merging the Department of the Navy, the newly created Department of the Air Force, and the Department of the Army, then known as the Department of War, into a single national military establishment overseen by a civilian Secretary of Defense. 2 years later, in August 1949, the national military establishment was renamed the Department of Defense, the name it has carried for more than 7 decades. Now, under Trump's executive order, the historic name is making a return in an official, if initially symbolic, capacity, signaling both a branding shift and a statement about the United States military posture in an increasingly tense global environment.